Well, greetings, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Danielle Smith Report. I'm Danielle Smith. It gives me no pleasure to talk about this today, honestly. I know that this issue was discovered a couple of weeks ago, but when you see a new investigation going into potential violations of elections law, once again on the cusp of a vote, it just makes you wonder, how is this going to end? How is this going to have any credibility? I think that politicians, and I wrote about this in my newsletter on Sunday, politicians have so eroded our confidence in our voting systems. And then they get mad when we say, gosh, I don't have confidence in the voting system anymore. So I had a couple of solutions for how we're going to solve that problem. But if you don't know what I'm talking to or talking about, let me share some of this background with you. I'm going to try to share my screen a little bit differently today. I don't know if this is going to work out particularly well. I'm still working out the technical details, my friends. I'll get this nailed pretty soon. But the person that you should be watching, I think, is Dwayne Bratt, because look, Dwayne Bratt, when he does his tweets, there's he gets sort of right to the nub of the matter. And one of the things that he pointed out is this story that appeared on the weekend, Elections Alberta. So let me see here where it goes. Elections Alberta is investigating the allegation of bulk UCP membership purchases. Allegations that the Kenney team was cheating with the UCP leadership review are not new. What is new is that the allegations are serious enough for Elections Alberta to investigate. And look at as well what Dwayne Bratt has to say. He says, so the person who cheated during the 2017 UCP leadership race passed Bill 81 in the middle of the night to make it easier to cheat in internal party politics is now being investigated for cheating in the 2022 UCP leadership review. Let me show you this story so that you can see where it's at. And I'll see if I can explain a little bit about what is going on here. Because Brian Jean had a team member, Vitor Marciano. Some of you may know him. He's been a political operative and strategist for a very long time. He was my chief of staff for a period of time. Obviously, Brian Jean's chief of staff. And he's working really closely on Brian Jean's campaign. So what he did is he discovered that he had the ability as a member to go and audit the list. And so, sure enough, he decided to go and audit the list. He went into the party headquarters and he spent a number of days at this, where he went through and what he was checking, because this is how the party leadership process works, or party membership process is supposed to work. The UCP says that you are supposed to buy your own membership with your own money. You have the ability to buy for close family members as well. So no problems, right? Everything's good. Now, here is the problem. There is the way that gets checked is that you are supposed to, most of our membership purchases now happen online. So the way it gets checked is that the address that you sign up under is the same as the address on your credit card. Great. So how do you find out if somebody is buying a membership for someone not at their address? Very simple. You would end up with a large number of transactions to a single credit card with multiple addresses associated with it. And that is exactly what Vitor discovered. So over 4,000, I'm hearing the number is 4,200. So 4,200 memberships were processed, the CBC News story says, on 6 credit cards. So just do a little bit of math on that, and you'll see that would be a pretty darn big household. Now, the plot gets a little thicker here because, and the whole situation gets a little murkier because as it happens, in the dead of night at 3 o'clock in the morning, Bill 81 was passed in the legislature on, call it the evening of the December 7th, going into the morning of December 8th. And there were 5 MLAs who were in the legislature at the time arguing against the changes. So I know there's a bunch of people, when I tell this story, you're going to say, well, why didn't all of the MLAs vote against that terrible piece of legislation? And here's the problem that you have. One of the tricks that politicians like to do if they're trying to pass a piece of of legislation that is, how shall we say, unpalatable, then what they would do is they would stick it in an omnibus bill that is designed to revise a bunch of statutes at once. It's called an omnibus piece of legislation, and that's precisely what Bill 81 was. It changed a lot of statutes at once, and some of the changes needed to be made. And so you stick this extra little clause in there, and so then a politician has to ask the question, do we hold up all of the changes because I was not able to get an amendment on one thing? And so 5 MLAs made that decision. They said that this was so important that they were prepared to vote the entire 320-page bill down. And those MLAs were Dave Hansen, Richard Godfrey, Leela Ahir, and then our 2 independents, Drew Barnes and Todd Lowen. So what was the change that was made? The change that was made was that instead of in law, you have to buy your own membership with your own money, they have changed the legislation to say that you can buy memberships on behalf of somebody else. And if you do, it is considered a contribution. Because this particular clause was amending the Elections Contribution Act, which is a different act, Elections Contributions and Financing Act. So so now you have to go to another clause and say, okay, well, if this buying of memberships is going to be subject to the contributions limit, what is that limit? That limit is $4,000. So just do some math on this. If you've got a $10 membership and you're able to buy memberships on behalf of other people, up to a maximum of 4,000 memberships or $4,000, then you can buy 400 memberships. That's what everybody was objecting to. There's a few of you who said, well, why didn't I hear more about this? And that was, I think, by design. But the fact that it got debated is the very last thing, going deep into the night in December on the last day of session, shows that this is something that the party really, really wanted, or the legislative team, the executive council putting it forward. Is something that they really, really wanted. So what has happened now? So what has happened now, if you take those numbers that I was just saying, is that if you have 6 credit cards that have processed 4,000 memberships, the numbers don't quite add up, do they? If you had 6 credit cards that were processing 400 each so they could get their maximum $4,000 contribution, then you'd only have 2,400 memberships. That's one problem. So the numbers don't work. So one of those credit cards was being overused. At least one, and maybe all 6 of them. The second level problem that we have is that this portion of the legislation didn't come into effect until March 31st. So the rules were broken, it looks like, under the letter of the law anyway. But the fact of the matter is that the rules, you weren't allowed to do this until after March the 31st. And so then the third problem is that the membership cutoff to participate in the leadership review was March the 19th. So none of this looks good, my friends. And I have to wonder at what point people say enough is enough here. I don't quite understand why we are not hearing from the executive council of the party. Don't quite understand why we're not hearing from more MLAs on this, because the left is having a field day on this. The reason I like watching Dwayne Brad is because you have to realize he is one of the most quoted political pundits in the province. And so if this is the thing, if this is the commentary that he is making, this is the commentary that's going out to the mainstream media. If this is the commentary going out to the mainstream media, then this is what most people are going to read in the newspaper. And this is what most people are going to be talking about, is how fishy all of this looks. None of it looks good for the party. And so now we're in a sort of another bind, that within the next, what is it, two more days, by May the 11th, 5:00 p.m., all of the membership votes have to be into Deloitte. So how is Deloitte going to be looking at this, right? So they're an independent auditing firm whose job it is to make sure that the votes are calculated appropriately. So now we have this Elections Alberta investigation casting some doubt on 4,000 of those votes. So what do? Do they set them aside? Because they'd have to do that on May 11th and afterwards, because part of the process they're doing is they're taking the ballot out of the verification envelope. It would be at that point that they would know whether the person bought their membership themselves or not. And so are they supposed to put them aside? If they count them and then the leader wins by a tiny share of the vote, call it less than 4,000 votes, does it then cast the entire process into doubt? How do you then claim that you've got a strong mandate if 4,000 of the ballots shouldn't have been tallied in the first place, because 4,000 of those ballots might not exist if somebody didn't pay for them and you weren't allowed to pay for them under the legislation? It is no way other to describe it, my friends. It is a bit of a mess. And so I was writing about this on the weekend. And one of the things that I said was that this is not the only time that we have seen the machinations of the political class and their operatives cast doubt about the outcome of a vote. I went through a whole tally of things that have occurred in Alberta politics, and strangely, a lot of them happening in Calgary, that I think has caused people to question every type of balloting that we do. So if you remember, the first time I noticed that the voting system was coming under some pressure was in 2005. That's when we saw that hundreds of mail-in ballots were being ordered from 2 computers to a post office box, where they were all filled out in the same handwriting. Important tip, I guess, if you're going to be voting on behalf of somebody else, at least use a different pen. And that was what alerted them that these hundreds of votes had come in. They did an investigation, major investigation, 25 police officers involved. 5 people ended up being charged and 2 went to jail. Some of them ended up pleading away on fines and pleading down their penalties to lesser charges, but still people went to jail. In 2017 in Calgary, you may recall that polling stations kept running out of ballots, some of them more than once. And when they did an audit review afterwards, they found that more than half of the polling stations in Calgary had run short of ballots, and some stations had to wait 6 hours to be resupplied. Come on, that was a pretty hotly contested race. And so people say, wonder how that happened. Then what happened in 2021 is there was one controversial candidate. And so they made the decision not to provide a voting list. Isn't that strange? Like, you would think, what I don't understand is, why can't we have Elections Canada share the voting list with each of the provinces and then share the voting list with each of the municipalities? I mean, I don't know about you, but I check off on my tax form every year, do you want to be added to Elections Canada list? I say yes. It's just simpler to do that. Why is it, if we're doing that every year, why is it so impossible for all of that information to be shared? Just add an extra box. Just say, do you agree that you want it shared with Elections Canada, Elections Alberta, and your local municipal elections office? Tick the box, and then all of a sudden you've got a list. Because if you don't have a list, how are you supposed to know that people haven't double voted? How are you supposed to know that a person is entitled to vote? Well, you swear an affidavit. So once again, that creates accusations that there might be people who are voting who shouldn't be voting. Then also, oh boy, do I even get into the US situation? Let me just put the positive spin on it. Positive spin on it is that Ron DeSantis in Florida, he's at least discovered the way that you can give credibility to an advance poll and mail-in ballot process is you count them first. You say, if you want to vote this way, it's up to you to make sure that you have them so that we can count them first, so that on election night we can give a result. So Florida had all kinds of problems in all kinds of previous elections. And so finally they came up with the answer. So great. That's the way to restore some confidence. No one else did it. And then, oh my goodness, in Georgia, 2 counties, the elections machines went offline in the middle of the night, and elections officials weren't able to say why that happened. They said, oh no, these machines aren't connected to the internet. They can't be hacked. Turns out many of the machines were. So now all of a sudden we've got a lack of trust in the voting machines as well. Now, also, did you see this story? In the most recent Canadian federal election, we found out 205,000 mail-in ballots went uncounted. And then, of course, notwithstanding the Elections Alberta investigation I just mentioned, there is also an RCMP investigation into what happened in the previous leadership contest, where it is alleged by MLA Prabgill And I have all the links to these stories as well, because many MLAs, ministers even, have been interviewed on this. Brian Jean's been interviewed by the RCMP on this. The premier acknowledged he's been interviewed by the RCMP on this. But the allegation is that there was again sort of a vote harvesting process that took place, where ballots went to made up email addresses allegedly, and then pins were allegedly used to vote in that race. And so that is still an ongoing investigation. So look, if you have a lack of trust in the voting system after watching this series of missteps and fiascos, I don't blame you one bit. But here's the problem with if we can't restore faith in the democratic vote and the democratic process, what have we got? I went through and found all of the different types of political systems that various societies have lived under over the years. There's a reason why Winston Churchill says that, what is his quote? The democracy is the worst system we got except for all the others, or something along those lines. It's not a perfect system. But would you rather have a monarchy? I mean, that's where you end up with your rulers chosen by bloodline. If you look at a theocracy, we've had theocratic regimes where the ruler is chosen by the top cleric or top religious leader. We've had military dictatorships most recently. So that's when generals end up scrapping with each other over who should lead. You have aristocracies or colonialism. So whether you've got a wealthy class of elites or a colonial foreign power that is ruling, none of these are better systems. The best system that we've got is democracy, which is why it is important that we restore some confidence and faith in our different political processes. So one of the things that I had been trying to educate you all on, as you know, is this idea that we can vote in a different way. I'm going to try to do this one more time to share with you, I think, another example of how we can use a different voting system, hopefully to restore some of the confidence. It says how blockchain technology can prevent voter fraud. This is an Investopia article, and one of the things that I've been trying to bring to the fore is that this new type of digital technology. I know the World Economic Forum and China have absolutely destroyed your confidence in any kind of digital mechanism to vote or to have digital ID because you're worried about tracking. But here's how I think blockchain can solve this problem that we have. Because if you look at what blockchain is, it basically is just one big giant ledger that records peer-to-peer transactions for all the world to see. And you cut out the middleman. That's the point. So you cut out the person who's receiving the ballots. You cut out the person counting the ballots. You cut out the accounting firm. You cut out all the voting machine. It's essentially what it does is it gives you a private key and a private token, and then you cast your ballot into a public ledger that for all the world to see, and then you have access to it. Yeah, you don't have a middleman that you have to worry about validating it wrong. You get ballot pre-validated, so everybody knows that you're entitled to vote. If you want to go and check and see that your vote was counted, you can. If you want to go and check and see it was put forward for the right person, you can. And so there are mechanisms that we could use. And the other part about using an electronic voting system, like I described, that is peer-to-peer and that is, again, an individual decentralized process as opposed to a centralized process, is that it allows for us to do way more voting on way more issues. I have been so frustrated over the last 2 years in particular, but it's gone on longer, where we see voting or we see decision-making on politicians by public opinion poll. So they send out a pollster to interview 1,000 people in an online panel, and then they come back with an answer and say, oh, well, I guess this is what people want us to do. I would rather see, if we have important public policy decisions being made, wouldn't it be better if you could essentially just send out a notification? Maybe you have referendum day every week where an important question of public policy is put to the people. And so then you can shoot out the question on this app. If you want to participate, you can participate. It'd be a heck of a lot better than a polling system. You'd actually be able to get more of a voting system, and you'd be able to do direct democracy. We now have the means to do it. Maybe the only reason politicians aren't talking about these types of approaches is they kind of like the system the way it is because it works for them. That's what I always worry about. So I'm just going to let you know that I recognize the concerns that everybody has about a digital voting system, and I think that what I'm attempting to do is attempting to show you that there really is two different paths that we can take forward. We could take forward a path where we have centralized control, centralized decision making, and decisions being moved further and further away from the people. Or we can take an approach where we have individual sovereignty, local sovereignty, provincial sovereignty, and we bring decisions closer to the people. That, I think, is the big battle that's going on right now. It's not, do we have digital ID or don't we? Or do we have digital voting or don't we? Or do we have digital currency or don't we? It's, do we have centralized all those things? Or do we have decentralized all of those things? And so that's where I'm trying to take the conversation to. I'm not sure that I'm succeeding. I'm doing my best to convince you that these are actually the solutions, but it's a bit of a hard leap, I understand. And politicians are doing a terrible job of trying to convince you themselves. And as a result, it just makes my job that much harder. But look, one more thing I want to share with you, because this is sadly going to be our future if we do not solve this problem of lack of trust in the electoral process. Let me see if I can scroll through my screens here. I'm going to talk to you about a few of these things in just a minute. But one of the things that I did notice is this: a new Saskatchewan political party is starting up to, as they say, give a voice back to the people. So what is going on here? A new provincial party in Saskatchewan has been announced. The party came out of, quote, the political, economic, and social crisis, and social crisis taking place in Saskatchewan. Maverick Party candidate Ken Rutherford, former federal agriculture minister Jerry Riz. Now, that's a pretty heavy hitter to be involved in this new party process. And independent MLA Nadine Wilson founded the Saskatchewan United Party. Isn't that interesting? So you have the Saskatchewan Party and the Saskatchewan United Party. So the party started building with its first event in March in Saskatoon's Prairieland Park with 1,200 people in attendance. Guys, I've been to a lot of political events, a lot of founding events. That's a very big number, 1,200 people in attendance, followed by an event in Regina with 300 people. And the press release says the party formed with the aim of bringing the province back together and healing the many divides that have existed as a result of the mismanagement, incompetence, and in some cases perceived malfeasance of various levels of the current government of Saskatchewan. You know, I kind of thought that Scott Moe was doing pretty well in Saskatchewan. But here's the real problem, right? So Nadine got kicked out of caucus for being unvaccinated. And so look what's happened is that we've got these cleavage lines that are being formed around these various freedom issues. And so in Saskatchewan now, it already looks like that has blown the traditional coalition apart. Saskatchewan's coalition is a little bit different than Alberta's because the Saskatchewan Party came together with a few MLAs from the Liberals and some MLAs from the Conservatives deciding to come together and form a party and drop the political labeling. It was the interesting move about the Saskatchewan Party is that it's not, they didn't feel it was adding to the brand to have conservative or liberal in the name. Now, look what's also happening in British Columbia. So British Columbia also came together, conservatives and liberals, but they called themselves the BC Liberal Party. They've got a new leader, Kevin Falcon. What does he want to do? Wants to change the name of the party. I don't know if it's gone through yet, but I remember being on a call with Canada Strong and Free, and they talked about naming it to be the BC Party. Maybe it'll be the BC United Party. So I'm just going to put it to you that if things do not coalesce, how shall I put this delicately, on May the 18th, so that the party can start, the UCP can start a renewal process, I think that we should be watching what's happening in Saskatchewan because I suspect that's what's going to happen here. So call it a Alberta United Party. So you've got United Conservative Party, Alberta United Party. It would be in sync with what's happening in Saskatchewan. You take out the labels, the conservative or liberal label. One of the problems Wild Rose has now is that they have called themselves the Wild Rose Independence Party. And while I believe in as much autonomy as necessary, I think independence is probably a step too far for most people. So, what happens May 18th? Let's map this out a little bit. So, if it is the case that the premier wins on May 18th, does anyone think that Brian Jean, having just filed, having been the victim of what happened in the 2017 race, and seeing this same kind of investigation now happening in the 2022 race, do you think he's just going to say, all's forgiven, no problem, I'm just going to roll in? I highly doubt it. Do you think Todd Loewen is, and Drew Barnes, having voted against so many of the pieces of legislation and spoken so publicly about the misdirection they think the UCP is going? Do you think they're just going to roll in? Don't think so. Do you think Paul Himon is? Nope. What about the MLAs who've spoken out? Are they going to be able to stay in the caucus? I don't know. So I suspect, based on what I've heard the premier say, that he's going to be kicking them out. So now you've got at least 4 and maybe more. All you need is 4 to have official party status. This is important because if you have 4 MLAs and have official party status in the legislature, then you are able to parlay that into running a full slate of candidates in the next election. Normally, when you're trying to create a new party from scratch, you have to go around and get 100 signatures from 87 ridings. I hope they haven't changed that. That's the way it used to be. So you had to get 8,700 signatures, but you can do a shortcut on that process if you've got a parliamentary caucus. So if it's already happening in Saskatchewan, I suspect we're just looking at the future for Alberta, is that we're likely going to see this movement split apart again. Sigh. And then what happens? Oh, gosh, there's also another political party I found out that has been on the stage. I've been wondering what's happening with the Buffalo Party. I always mention the different permutations of what could happen post May 18th. And so I think this is what it's shaping up. So you end up with the UCP party, maybe call it the Alberta United Party, if we're going to use that language, maybe led by Brian Jean. Then you end up with Paul Himon's Wild Rose Independence, whatever party Drew Barnes creates, whatever party Todd Loewen creates, and the Buffalo Party. Now we've got 6 parties that are all vying for the same vote and up against a united Rachel Notley NDP party. How do you think that's going to turn out? This is why I'm not keen to see this party split apart. Really, I think my conclusion that I've come to, and my timing is always off, but the conclusion I have come to is that parties can be changed from within. If you get enough MLAs with particular persuasion, they can put pressure on the party and the leadership to go in a different direction. And so we're about to, whatever happens May 18th, May 19th, we're about to start into a series of local candidate nominations. And there's going to be a lot to choose from. So I just want you to be aware of the developments that are happening in just to our east. And I'll probably want to interview them because I need to understand all the factors behind that. There's no one more surprised than me that Scott Moe is under this kind of pressure. Even though he did follow kind of in lockstep with every other province, it seemed to me that he had found a bit of a better balance. He certainly was polling higher in public opinion polling than the premier here was. Our Alberta premier was polling at the either bottom 1 or 2 for almost the entire last 2 years, whereas Scott Moe was polling pretty well near the top. So if anyone wants to send me some background, because I know many of you come from Saskatchewan and still have family in Saskatchewan, to tell me what exactly has caused the reversal of fortunes, I'd be delighted to have you tell me. All right, I think I've got one more thing that I want to play for you because it's appearing on my locals feed. And I think I'll probably end up doing a much longer segment on this, but I just want to give you a few of the maybe just a few links so that you can go and do some background research yourself so that we are able to have a longer conversation about it. But here's the what I wanted to play for you. It's a YouTube video. Oh my goodness. It's only 22 seconds long. It was from a public event. So who knows? YouTube is allowing me to be broadcasting again this week, but they have these really strict rules about about playing other videos. It seems to me this is public information. So I'm going to see if I can play this for you. I wonder if um, you know what? I hope you can hear it. This is one of the things when you're sharing screen is that I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it, but let's give it a whirl and see if you can. Okay, if you didn't hear that, because I don't know if I did that and did that sharing screen right, but if you did hear that or didn't hear that, let me explain to you what he said. He said that the UN, this is on May the 4th, the UN and the World Economic Forum have announced a joint partnership to accelerate the implementation of the Agenda 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals. This is what I do not understand. You have everybody concerned that the World Economic Forum has outsized influence on our governments and on our global institutions. And so, what do? They say, oh my goodness, anyone who says that is crazy. It's a conspiracy theory. And then they go and have a formal announcement like that saying how important it is for the World Economic Forum to be in partnership with the UN on achieving these goals. Like, you can't have it both ways, guys. Either just state why you're involved and why the World Economic Forum is important and why it has the influence it does, or stop doing these kinds of announcements because it just makes people suspicious. Now, here's the other thing I would say, and again, this goes to the issue of it's a matter of what level of government is making these decisions. Because I thought I better have a look at these because I've looked at these sustainable development goals before, and there's nothing really on them that freaks me out. If you look at what it is that they're aiming for, I think most of us would agree that these are good objectives. So let me go through so that you can see, and then I'll try to explain why I think many of you are finding it problematic. So if you go online, and I'll try to include the link. This is what the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is, transforming our world. And there's 17 different sustainable development goals. Now that you've seen this, you're going to see it everywhere. Sustainable development goals, you've got different levels of government, you've got different politicians, different political parties, various large corporations who have all signed on to the sustainable development goals. And here's what those sustainable development goals are. Oh, they've got them up. I know it's probably light, but let me have this up here so that if you want to squint at the screen, you can see them. So sustainable development goals and targets. One, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. I'm behind that. Number two, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. I'd like to know more about what they think sustainable agriculture is, but I'm all on board with that as well. Goal three, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Number four, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education, promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Number five, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Number six, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Number seven, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. There again, would like to know what their definition of modern energy is. Number eight, promote sustained, inclusive, sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work. Sorry, guys, I just ended up shooting ahead on that one. And decent work for all. Number nine, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. Number 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. Number 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. There's that say sustainable again. Number 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. That one needs obviously a little bit more investigation. Number 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. And you see there's little asterisks there. That's one that we've got to take a closer look at. Goal 14, conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, marine resources for sustainable development. Goal 15, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. There's 2 more. Goal 16, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. And number 17, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So you see, when you read those out, those aspirational targets, you can say, yeah, those are great aspirational targets. The question always comes in, at what level? Because I think what we have now determined, I'm hoping that you're seeing, I'm trying to build the case, that the further you move decision making away from the people who are impacted, the more you end up having money eaten up in administrative costs. I'm going to see if I can find a Canadian version of that study I shared last week by the, I think it was by the von Mises Institute, and it was a libertarian studies paper that found that 70% of the cost of a central government program goes to administration. So you collect $3 billion worth of taxes, $2 billion goes to administration, only $1 billion gets to the front line. This is the problem with every single one of those goals, is that if it's going to be managed centrally through the UN and the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and World Trade Organization and the International Monetary Fund, it's going to be a fiasco and boondoggle. Like, we just know that. That's just a given. But if it's a matter of everybody working towards these goals at the local level and then just reporting up so that we can share best practices, then why would we be opposed to that? That is the big battle that is shaping up right now, is that there are obviously those who believe that they know better than anyone else and that they can centrally plan their way through anything, especially if they use AI and machine learning. They figure that they can come up with all of the answers centrally. And I'm just going to put it to you, you cannot. You have to have more and more decisions locally. And if this is where the battle is we shouldn't be battling on whether or not we want to end world poverty. Of course we do. But how do we end world poverty? Do you transfer a bunch of money to the UN and the World Economic Forum, and then they say, we got this? Or do you, in Alberta, partner with an impoverished country? We need agriculture workers. This is one of the things that occurred to me. How would you address that target? Well, we need agriculture workers, and they need to learn more sustainable agriculture practices. So why don't we enhance our temporary foreign worker program and choose 2 or 3 countries in the world where we can do a worker exchange, so that we can bring people over, have them earn a decent wage, have them learn our farming practices, and then they can return and take those practices to their home country, and then we can continue fostering a relationship with them. That's the difference, right? Is that we can achieve the same goals that are there, but we can achieve them better if we take the lead on it. So we will have more conversations about this, my friends, because I know that there are so many of you who are very, very worried about the direction that some of these international agencies want to go. But I think that the question, if we start saying that we don't want to achieve these targets, then we're not going to win over people who do actually want to make sure that we all have access to the very best standard of living possible. I just think we do it a different way. That's my, my 2 bits on it. Anyway, my friends, we're out of time for today. We'll be back at this again on Wednesday. Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been the Danielle Smith Show.